one thing is that I never give up. I say that because I just think that we cannot give up. We must fight back.
We're here today with New York State Senator Robert Jackson, who represents the 31st New York State Senate District on the west side of Manhattan. I do have to mention that in his district is CCNY, my alma mater, as you can see. So shout out to CCNY and all the alumni. So right off the bat, Senator, how have you been doing during this crisis, and what has your days look like?
Well, I feel like I'm sort of like locked in, meaning during the pandemic, it's a shelter in at home. And so obviously that's what I've been doing. But, from a realistic point of view, knowing that all of us, meaning 213 state senators and city and state assembly members, we're up for re-election. So being out there is a normal process. So we are being out there with a limited point of view, obviously wearing our masks and others wearing gloves, but it's tough. And so sometimes I am on meetings and Zoom conferences or other platforms a full entire day, sometimes 7 hours. I mean, sometimes you're on Zoom conferences and other platforms, you just need a break because your eyes, and then you have to stay up to date with what's going on. Things are moving so quickly from an internet point of view. So you're reading your emails, you're reading Twitter, you're reading Facebook, you're on Instagram, or your staff and I, and so all of this, and then you're dealing with phone calls, and it's extremely busy. So some people perceive that because we're not in session, that in essence our workload is light, especially because majority of all of the state representatives and city council representatives, their offices are closed. But even though our office is closed, we are clearly doing business like we normally did, but by telephone and emails. And so it's been very busy, especially Rick, you know how many people were unemployed in this country. Right now, they said 46 million people. And obviously, when the crunch hit, the system crashed. And so when the system crashed, everybody, you hear the testimony of constituents, they were like calling 24/7 just to try to get in order to get their claim in. But obviously, DOL and the state of New York has gotten their act together. I don't think that anyone, in my opinion, was prepared for this pandemic where everything was going to shut down. So in my office, when you call my office, it literally goes to a staff member's cell phone, but their cell phone number doesn't show up in order for us to deal with that. And so internally, if I'm dealing with you as a constituent regarding unemployment insurance or rent issues or health issues, we put that into Bluebird. That's a system that is, processed at the state, so you know what are the major issues that are impacting the constituents all over. So all of that goes into Bluebird. And so staff are doing that. If they have a laptop, if they have an iPad, or they have it on their actual cell phone. So work is a little different, but the work goes on because the issues and concerns that impact our constituents is continuous.
I want to get your thoughts and opinions on what's been going on after the death of George Floyd and the protests that have been going on all around the country.
Wow. It is basically the entire, not only New York City, New York State, but the entire world has been shaken like this and like to action, basically. And more specifically, locally in New York City, our district, Jamani Williams, Scott Stringer, Corey Johnson, and for those who may not know, Jamani Williams is the public advocate of the city of New York. Corey Johnson is the speaker of the New York City Council. And Scott Stringer is the city controller. So when you look at the elected public officials in New York City, 3 out of the 4, along with state assembly members, state senators, and some city council members, and some activists, we took a knee. I think the second day, I believe, of the curfew, we took a knee at 43rd Street and Times Square. And we took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the same time that we witnessed by someone videotaping the murder of George Floyd. And I said to people, if you've never taken a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, do that. And you see how long that is. It's a long time. And that's why the whole world has been shaken up, because the systemic racism that exists, but not only in NYPDs across the country and across the world, but also outside of NYPD or outside of police departments. So obviously, as you know, I'm a member of the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, Asian Caucus in the state legislature. And I'm trying to give these type of details because I want everyone to understand that there's a caucus and there's 63 members of the legislative caucus, members of the Assembly and Senate. We held a virtual press conference across the state, from Long Island to Harlem to the Bronx, to Albany, to Rochester, Buffalo, speaking about the repealing 50A. And as you know, 50A deals with holding police, no matter where they are, their records transparent and accountable for the actions that they have done as a police officer, or things that they have done positive, if it's in their record, to deserve a promotion. So we feel it's transparent, and in New York State, it's not. And so that focus of that statewide press conference by the caucus was to bring about a repeal of 58 and saying loud and clear, enough is enough. And so that's what that was about. And obviously, I was involved in that at the Harlem State Office Building. That's where that was held at. And then about a couple of days thereafter, my office organized a march from the most northern part of my district in Marble Hill down Inwood, Washington Heights, West Harlem to Riverbank State Park, where approximately 2,500 to 3,000 people protesting, had signs and everything, and listening to our elected public officials at March about repealing 58. And Rick, let me say this to you. In looking at the crowd, the majority of them were not Black and Latinx. The majority of them were Caucasian, whites in essence, little kids holding up signs, Black Lives Matter. And people are just know that the systemic racism within NYPD and the country must stop, and it ends. And as I've said, it starts with each and every one of us. And so that's what that was about. And obviously, you know that the past, Tuesday and Wednesday, and I getting the day straight because I was up in Albany and I came back. I came back 2 nights ago. And let me just tell you, all of the legislation in order to bring the police departments in check with the people, we've passed and repealed 50A. And the governor is, I believe, he may have signed it into law already or going to sign it into law. So that's a victory on behalf of the people to have transparency and accountability in our police departments across the state of New York. And that's a good thing. And as George Floyd's daughter said, she said, "My daddy changed the world." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we hope that is the case. But obviously, people are still demonstrating and marching. And I was just told by my daughter is 33, so she's in the millennium class, that our president of the United States, Donald Trump, is holding a rally on Juneteenth Day. That's Juneteenth. That's June 19th. That's when the last state basically freed their quote unquote slaves. And it's going to be held in Oklahoma, where the people of this country massacred Blacks and destroyed the city where they lived at. That is so criminal. That is so intentional that my daughter said, we must, here in New York, do something about that. Maybe we'll come together at Union Square or some of the big place to express our collective outrage of his intent to do that. Because basically, the systems are going to clash. The system of continuous racism being led by Donald Trump, and those that people of goodwill and understanding that we're all human beings. It doesn't matter of your skin, it doesn't matter of your race, that we're all working to end racism in our country. We must come together, even to come together with millions of people across our country to express our outrage and the intent behind that. That's what we have to do.
So, what is personally, how are you feeling about everything?
Personally, one thing is that I never give up. I say that because I just think that we cannot give up. We must fight back. And I've said I was on a Zoom meeting of 3 Parks Democratic Club. And if you don't know, Rick, that's an Upper West Side Democratic Club, okay? And majority of the people of that Democratic Club are white. There's some Blacks and a couple of Latinx people, but the majority white. And I've said to them that the people that elect us want us to go the distance to best represent them. And sometimes going the distance, as I know, is filing appeals, going to court, walking to Albany 150 miles for education. And so that's what they expect. And even, Rick, when I was in the city council, I co-chaired the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus for 8 years. And we filed an amicus brief in the lawsuit for stop, question, and frisk. We filed an amicus brief in the FDNY lawsuit that was filed by the Vulcan Society. You know who they are, right? The Vulcan Society are the Black and Latino firefighters. They filed a lawsuit alleging that the exam was discriminatory. And they won. So people have to stand up and fight back and don't feel that they're alone, and they're not alone. So that's why the caucus, we filed through attorneys that were, representing us pro bono, we filed amicus briefs in those lawsuits. And so we were part of the change agent that has to be done.
Have you been able to speak to members of the NYPD, and if so, what is their general sentiment about what's going on?
I have not spoken regarding the rallies that we held, as far as the caucus with the press conference. And when I say it was a press conference, let me just say this to you. At that press conference in Harlem, which Inez Dickens Al Taylor, myself, and other electeds that were non-members of the caucus also. But the crowd around that press conference was over 200 people in Harlem with their signs and everything. I have not talked to the police then, and then put together this rally. My chief of staff, Joanna Garcia, spoke with NYPD concerning the coordination of them with this march and rally. And I say coordination because we started in Marble Hill, and I believe that precinct in the Bronx, it may have been the 50th precinct, I'm not absolutely sure. But then we moved into Inwood and Washington Heights, and that's the 34th precinct. We moved further south of the George Washington Bridge, that's the 33rd precinct. And when we moved into West Harlem, that was the 30th precinct. So there was coordination between 4 precincts and then coordination with the Parks Police, the New York State Parks Police. So there was coordination, but I did not talk to them directly. I do know that I spoke to my chief of staff, and we said that we wanted to send them a letter thanking them for their coordination and in the rally, because the rally started off on the sidewalk, but then went actually into the streets and stopped all of the traffic, not only on one side, but on both sides. So clearly they assisted in a very peaceful march and gave us all of the leeway in order so that our goal and objective was achieved. And at the end, Rick, what I say to people, if you don't know, I give the greeting, assalamu alaikum, mean go in peace. And that's what's important. We want people to protest, to be active and engaged in understanding that the police are there to serve us. And we needed them to serve us by escorting us, by giving us the way to march in peace and expressing ourselves through our signs, through our numbers, and through us even saying, defund the police, Black Lives Matters, calling out the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. That's the type of action that we want. So we need changes, and we know that those changes take place by action, and also we need legislative action. As you know, the city council, I think, has passed or is passing banning the chokehold, just like we did also up in Albany. So that's the type of action that the people want to see. What I say to people, the most important thing is communication, talking to one another. And so at least when you're talking to each other, then you can understand where each other are coming from. But I can understand some of the stresses that they're feeling right now because of all of the protests. But I know that I was watching on WhatsApp, someone sent me where there were approximately, looks like 12 Black and Latinx police officers communicating. And this happened to be not like just now, I guess it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they filed a lawsuit against the quotas because NYPD was saying there's no quotas. And they're all sitting there being interviewed, and they said that's a lie. We do have quotas, and they tell us go out there and stop them. The ages between 14 and 23, the young Black and Latinx, you need to stop them. So, and these are all police officers. Are they lying? They're not lying, but someone wasn't telling the truth. So, and that's what we're trying to break. That's what they're trying to break by standing up. Because one of them said, our careers are over because they perceive us as rats. This is what he said. And you know what he said? He said, it's like the mafia. These are police officers saying this. And so that's the environment that we have to break, period.
How do we get to a point where if there ever was any restoring public trust in local law enforcement or just law enforcement in general?
Mm-hmm. How do we bring about the type of relationship that we want to have? One of my neighbors in my building, I was telling this to a friend of mine yesterday afternoon when I was going out, he was coming in, and So we're chatting and he was talking and we're talking about the rally. You know what he said to me? He said, I've lived in this building for over 25 years. And going in and out and down the street, when I see police officers standing, let's say on a corner, none of them would smile and say, hi, how you doing? And that's breaking the ice to have communication with the people that they're there to serve. That's the difference. Where you're policing someone, you're like watching over them and making sure that they're going to be in order. I mean, that's not the type of environment that we want. So communication is very important. For me, whether or not it's a police officer or whether or not they're auxiliary police, and you know, a lot of auxiliary police in New York City are volunteers. And a lot of them look like you and myself. I'd see them and I'd say hello to them. When I see them out there working, putting in time, they're not being paid. I say hello to them, and they respond back. But then again, I'm an elected public official. Some of them may not know that I'm an elected public official, but communication, opening up lines of communication to break the ice. Even sometimes when I see a police car driving by, I wave to them. Hey, how you doing? You know, it's not about anything else but just breaking the ice, letting them know that if they're going to be in our community, they have to be part of the community and not outside forces coming in, policing.
This is a little bit of a cynical question. Since there's been so many proposals for police reform, law enforcement reform, as we just discussed, these proposals don't seem like they were just made up yesterday. Why does it take a tragedy for police reform, something that has been talked about and discussed and protested for many, many years? Why does it take something, you know, this egregious to turn into legislation like was passed yesterday?
That is a good question. And all I can say to you is that when you look at many of the incidents, murders, killings, abuse, mostly all of them within the past years have been recorded where? On our cell phones. And now body cameras, okay? And so now there is a transaction that either is being caught on video and audio tape as to what is being saying. What we saw going back in Greenwich Village with the enforcement of the wearing of masks and social distancing, the guy, a Latinx police officer, dragged him in, punched him around, put his foot on his neck, and that's all on videotape. And in almost everyone's opinion, that was an abuse. And how can you respect when they yell at you, get the back, with loud? That's not being respectful. CPR, courtesy, professionalism, and respect. And that's what we want. But anyway, I think that obviously that Breonna Taylor being shot and killed in her own home, and because supposedly they had a no-knock search, and her boyfriend or her companion, whoever it was, felt that maybe someone's breaking in and robbing, so he, licensed gun owner, he shoots one of the police officers, probably and they're dressed in regular gear, not uniforms, in the leg, and 8 times she's shot and killed. You know, all of the things that we see right in front of us happening in New York City, in Eric Garner and others. And this latest one, as I said to you, basically was, I guess, that was in a tea kettle that was boiling up. And this made it go off. And as I've given examples, I get up in the morning, I put on the tea kettle. And then when it's ready, you know it's ready because it whistles, it lets you know. And this was the whistle that's letting the entire world know, that we're not going to stand for it anymore. And I do think that we collectively at the local, at the state level, and at the federal level must make it and put it all together. And is it going to be perfect? No, nothing is perfect, but you can then adjust things as we go along. And that's what's important. So if you have the good intention in your heart, then with our minds, we hopefully will put things together that we all can live with. And everyone can go in peace and not have the police policing us, but the law enforcement making sure that the safety and security of the people that they're sworn to serve is okay.
I hope you noticed that when you said when it whistles, you heard an alarm go off in the background. That was kind of cool. Yeah, that was kind of
I
cool.
did not hear the alarm go off.
Can you explain what defunding the police department means? Because I know that in times like this, social, political, racial unrest, each side has a tendency of talking past each other. So for the people that just react to the phrase defund police, can you please explain what that actually means?
From my perspective, and I have not had a discussion with anyone about defunding the police department, but from my perspective, the City Council of New York and the mayor are going to discuss these particular matters. So anyone that's listening or will be watching this, especially before the end of June, more likely around the next 10 days or so, communicate with your city council members about your opinions about quote unquote defunding police. Because de Blasio has already said that he's going to move some money from NYPD for social services and education. And in my opinion, that's a good thing, especially when you look at the NYPD's budget. And I think that they have a decrease of 1%, or proposal of decrease of 1%, whereas other agencies are up to 20% decrease. Well, as I've heard the police commissioner the other day on TV talking about there are, I think, 34,000 people that work for NYPD. And I know advocates have said some of these police officers that are not on the street but in doing administrative duties, they need to transition those to appropriate level individuals that can do those type of work. And those police officers that are police officers and being paid salary should be moved appropriately for duties that are appropriate for police officers. I know that the unions that represent the administrative employees, even when I was in the city council, was obviously was pushing for that and filed actions about that in order to have police officers basically out on patrol in the streets. And so I don't know how much it's going to be, but I think it's going to happen based on the little that I know, but by the actions of people and actions of members of the city council. And I would think that, Rick, that there's two individuals that co-chair the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus of the city council. And let me tell you who they are. Danique Miller from Queens, from South Queens, Jamaica area, St. Albans area. Danique Miller, he's the co-chair of the caucus. And Adonis Rodriguez, who in Northern Manhattan. Those are two co-chairs of the caucus. And I know that when I was a co-chair of the caucus with Maria del Carmen Arroyo and others, and Fernando Cabrera, depending on what time it is, that we put forward information into the budget about that impacts our people. And so we're talking about basically the impact that that's going to have not only on our people, but the entire city of New York. So the caucus is the one, and I will be talking to both of them and my city council member, who happens to be Adonis Rodriguez. And if you look at my area that I represent from Marble Hill down to 26th Street and 9th Avenue. everyone effectively communicating with their representatives. What we do by doing that, we help them to focus about what needs to be done, what percentage of the budget can be done, and obviously through negotiations with the mayor. And as you know, and if your constituents that are watching this, if in fact there's not an agreement, then if there's a piece of legislation, the city council can override a mayor's veto, okay? And you need at least 34, but reality, you need about 36, about 2 to 3 people more, because no matter who the mayor is, they're gonna pick off 1 or 2, So I just say that I think that that's gonna happen. To what amount is another question.
Well, let's get into COVID. First off, how do you feel that these protests might affect the ongoing COVID recovery?
Well, anytime you have people coming together in crowds like that has occurred as a result of the protests, those exposures are not the best. Understanding that someone may be walking around with COVID-19 and not aware because they don't have symptoms as of yet. And that's why it's imperative that we wear masks. That's why it's imperative that some of us wear gloves, others have Perel and sanitizer, and that's why we need to keep the distance of 6 feet. But quite frankly, with these protests, it's been very, very, very hard for people to keep the 6 feet social distancing. And in fact, at the rallies that we've held at the Harlem State Office Building, or when we march, we ask does everyone have a mask? If you don't have a mask, we have masks up here. Please come to the front, we give you a mask. Does anyone need sanitizer? We have bottles of sanitizer, come up here and use it. And please stay social distancing. I mean, we have to continue to express to everyone how important that is in order to stay safe. But obviously, in my opinion, people are fired up and they're demanding action. And they know that they're coming to march and they're not going to be 6 feet apart. But this is not stopping the actions that are happening because that's the pressure that's being brought in order to make things happen. So I hope that we don't see a spike. I know that in other states, when they went to different phases of phase 1 and phase 2 around the country, that the number of COVID-19 cases, positive cases has increased. But New York City, New York State, I tell you yesterday when I was driving around and I'm looking at people in the park, or other places, there were many people that were not wearing masks. And in my opinion, that was not good because they can be exposing themselves, or if they are COVID-19 positive and not aware of it, they could be exposing others. And as you know, the older you are, and if you have underlying health conditions, the more vulnerable you are. And for myself, I'm young, I'm fit. When I say, wait a minute, my daughter said, "You're not young, you're old," because Rick, I'll be 70 years old in December. But I'm in shape. I don't have any underlying conditions. I run, but one thing I know is you never know. You never know, and so that's what I think the pressure is being brought on by everyone in order to move the system to end systemic racism, and people are aware of what we've been told: mask, glove, sanitizer, social distancing. People are aware of that. As soon as you get in the house, go wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. That's to be safe. So that's what we have to do. Until hopefully soon we'll be over this. And obviously, medical experts have said that more than likely there's going to be a spike in the fall. So life has changed for all of us, and I think it's never going to be the same as it was before.
So, speaking within your district, what would you
Mhm.
say is the group or groups that have been most affected by the pandemic?
Most affected by the pandemic are the Latinx and Black communities. You see, I didn't say Black and Latinx because my district, the 31st Senatorial District, is about 45% Caucasian, in essence, white, and about 40% Latinx. Majority of the Latinx communities that I represent are Dominican, okay? And only about 12% are Black or African American. That's the makeup of my senatorial district, over 300,000. So, and especially when you look at undocumented residents, the majority in New York City of the undocumented residents are Latinx, okay? And now you have undocumented that are African and from Europe too, but the majority are Latinx. Um, and especially under this president, the fear of ICE and other formal processes, people they're staying away. Even though we communicate that everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what your status, should fill out the census information. Some people are so afraid that they may not do it. So I encourage you, please do it. Because what that means is that from the federal government point of view, more dollars will come to our state and our city in order to help those that are in need. And from an electoral process, it will determine how many representatives we have in Washington, D.C. that's going to advocate for New Yorkers. So, and as you see, I just explained that to those that, because part of just answering the question is making sure everyone understands the value of certain things. But obviously, uh, if you work for a government agency like the city or the state, obviously you're entitled to health insurance and all of that stuff. And so, but if you're undocumented or if you're an independent worker, you may not have health insurance. You may not be earning money right now. So we need to do everything we can in order to help the people we serve. Just yesterday morning, I was at Dykeman Houses where the food bank um, was giving out boxes of food, 2 boxes to each individual in line. And the line was through, and I'm going like this, through the Dykeman Houses that came back out on Dykeman Street, and then all the way up to 10th Avenue and around the corner. That's how long the line was. And I was speaking to some of the coordinators about, so how many people do you serve? About 500 in 3-hour periods a day? He said, no, about 700 twice a month. And people are out there. So people are in need. And Rick, I'd say to you, I've said this loud and clear. If you know anything about me, my fight, I've been fighting to make sure that every child gets a good education so they can grow up to be whatever they want to be and to help their families. And as you know, many people, especially if you immigrated here, my wife immigrated here, and just like many other families, doesn't matter where, in Mexico and Venezuela and other countries, Puerto Rico's is part of our country, but people, they're sending money back home to their families. Do you know what I mean? And that's so important for the family survivals, wherever they may be. And so it's imperative that the two most important things is we have to make sure no one goes hungry, that people have food to eat, and also a shelter over their head. Okay, that's so important. And especially with the rent situation now, the majority of my people, if you're not aware, my district, the 31st Senatorial District, has the most rent regulated units in the entire state of New York. And you know where the number two is? In the Bronx, Gustavo Rivera, the second highest of rent regulated units in the state of New York. That's what we're dealing with. And those are the people we're trying to save to make sure they survive this pandemic.
What's the outlook for small businesses look like going into the summer? I know that there's been some sort of apprehension and trepidation about the federal government um, helping out small businesses moving forward. But is there anything that small businesses can do through the summer, through the phases of reopening, to sort of help themselves in the wake of a potential second wave and a potential second lockdown?
Well, first of all, I hope there's not a second lockdown. But I think it's imperative, if I was a small business owner, I make sure that I'm communicating with my Congress member, our U.S. Senator, U.S. Senators Chuck Schumer and Gillibrand, are my member of Congress, and my Congress member is Adriana Espaillat, my state senators and assembly members, and my city council member. In essence, as a small business, they need to put pressure on the system to see what they can do to give the small businesses the stimulus that they need to survive this pandemic. And obviously, the easiest route is the federal route, because the only government that can print their own money is the federal government. State can't do that. City can't do that. And obviously, since the pandemic, the epicenter of the pandemic is New York City, New York State, that it's, the federal government, that's where we need to put pressure. Because recently, I think there were about $400 million has been brought to New York State that Chuck Schumer said. I think I heard that 2 days ago. And New York City is going to get about $330 million of that, which is a good thing because we need it, understanding. But also, I think that that the small businesses need to look at and find out from their electeds what type of funds are available, either grants with or zero interest loans, and that's any type of money from a grant or zero interest loans to get them up and running. And also, as I've said, to even tenants, where tenants cannot pay rent. Small businesses, more than likely, they're renting space from the landlord. They need to communicate with them and see if, in fact, that they can be given a break. And obviously, some people may take a negative attitude. They're not going to give me a break. You don't know. You have to ask. And they know, landlords know what the situation is because everyone is feeling it. Everyone is feeling it. But that's what we have to do in order to ensure that small businesses survive. And it's been said loud and clear, and I truly believe that that the way we've done business before, it's been changed forever. And there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of small businesses that will not be able to survive. And then why do I say that? I mean, many people have said that because even when they were open, they were on the edge of just surviving. And, if in fact they have to pay 4, 5, 6 months of rent, they don't have the money. And so that's why I said that we as elected public officials should be communicating if there's any grant money that they can receive, or if in fact there is zero interest loans. And as you know, the PPP, the paycheck program, where money was given if you put in forward, if you got it, and many small businesses did not get it, in order to hire employees back, in order to at least hire employees back to keep them working. So that's what a small business owner has to be in tune to, or whether it doesn't matter if, some small business owners, there are many of them in my community are Latinx. Well, we must be able to make sure that they get all of the information they want. And that's why when we put out our electronic updates, in my office. The electronic updates are in English and in Spanish. When I put out my newsletter is in English and Spanish. And that's very, very important. As I indicated to you, about 40% of my constituents are Latinx. But small businesses, the same thing in Northern Manhattan.
Is there anything you'd like to say or add that hasn't been addressed today?
Well, you know, we've addressed a lot, but my message to everyone is look after one another, care about your neighbor, help someone if you can. My office set up a program called mutual aid. Mutual aid, basically people have signed up to be pod leaders. That may be a pod leader for your building or for your block. And it's just neighbors helping neighbors to survive during this pandemic. So that's important. Look after especially your elderly neighbors and try to be helpful any way you can. And if we help one another and we stay together, we will survive this pandemic and we will come out on the other side of it stronger and better and more united as a community of people that live in our community and also from small businesses. So what I heard on the news today, that more people shopped online through Amazon and other platforms in the past 2 months than the last 12, I guess, high points where people shop. And so I ask you, for small businesses to survive, we have to shop at our small businesses in our community, our local hardware store, our local restaurant, our local beauty parlor, hair, barber shop, locksmith, all of these places that are the small businesses. And many mayors and others have said small businesses are the backbone of our economy. Well, if that's the case, then let's make sure that we do that. And that's my message. In unity, there is strength. And that's what we must do. We must organize and be strong in order to survive this pandemic.
State Senator Robert Jackson, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to me. Thank you for all of the work that you've done, not only in the state Senate, but your political career. Let's do this again sometime.
Well, thank you. And let me just say to all of you, assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you out there, no matter who you are. That's in Arabic. So I send the greetings of peace. So go in peace, everyone.